For 15 long years, every decision I made was guided by a single dream: owning my own home. It started when I was 23, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and a mountain of student debt. I remember sitting in my cramped studio apartment in Boston, rain pattering against the windows as my landlord's footsteps creaked overhead. That night, I made a promise to myself that one day I would answer to no one about where and how I lived. I took a job at Carter & Mitchell, a mid-sized advertising firm downtown. The pay wasn't spectacular, but it was steady. My colleagues splurged on weekend getaways to Cape Cod or New York, while I tracked every dollar in a worn notebook my grandmother had given me. "Sarah," she'd said before she passed, "write down your dreams alongside your numbers, and they'll both add up someday." My friends thought I was extreme. "Live a little, Sarah," Jen would say, waving concert tickets in my face or showing off her new shoes. "We're only young once." But I smiled and declined, heading home instead to my second job waiting tables at Rosie's Diner on Thursday and Friday nights. The owner, Frank, would slip me leftover pie at the end of my shifts. "You're working too hard, kid," he'd tell me, but there was respect in his eyes. Every month, I'd walk into Eastern Bank with whatever I'd managed to save, sometimes just $200, on good months maybe $600. Marjorie, the bank teller who eventually became a friend, would grin as I approached. "Building the dream, huh?" she'd say, updating my house fund balance with a flourish. I lived in 5 different rental apartments during those years, each one a temporary stop on the road to somewhere permanent. There was the basement unit in Alston that flooded every spring, the 3rd-floor walk-up in Jamaica Plain where the heating failed every winter, the room in a shared house in Somerville where my roommates rotated so frequently I stopped learning names. Each place reinforced my determination. Dating was complicated. "You want to split the check again?" Tom had asked on our 3rd date, not hiding his disappointment. I explained my saving plan, and he nodded politely. But there was never a 4th date. Later came David, who called my financial discipline inspiring, but couldn't understand why I wouldn't move in with him to save on rent. "Because this isn't about saving on rent," I tried to explain. "It's about building something that's mine, alone." We parted ways after 8 months. When I met Michael at a friend's wedding, something felt different. He listened intently when I talked about my dream, asking thoughtful questions instead of dismissing it. "That's amazing," he said simply. "Most people just drift through life without a clear goal." 6 months later, we were serious. A year after that, we were engaged, with a clear understanding. My house fund remained mine, even after marriage. "I admire your independence," he told me, though I sometimes caught his mother, Eleanor, looking at me strangely when the topic came up at family gatherings. "In my day," she'd say, "husbands provided the home." I'd smile tightly and change the subject. By year 10, I had been promoted twice and finally had enough for a down payment, but the Boston housing market had skyrocketed beyond my reach. I nearly broke down in Marjorie's office at the bank when I realized this. "Don't give up now," she said firmly. "Maybe look a little farther out. The commuter rail goes pretty far these days." So I expanded my search to towns I'd barely heard of. Michael was supportive but concerned about the commute. His mother was less subtle. "Why not just move into our family's summer cottage in Gloucester? We hardly use it anymore." The offer was tempting, but the cottage would never truly be mine. I politely declined. Year 12 brought a cancer scare, a lump in my breast that turned out to be benign, but the 2 weeks of waiting for results forced me to confront what really mattered. I didn't regret a single dinner out I'd skipped or vacation I'd passed on. If anything, the health scare reinforced that stability and independence weren't luxuries. They were necessities. Year 14, and my savings were substantial, but housing prices had only climbed higher. I was approaching 40, and sometimes at night, I'd wonder if I'd made a terrible mistake, spending my youth chasing something I might never catch. Then Michael showed me a listing in Newburyport, a small coastal town north of Boston. An old Victorian that needed work, but had good bones. It was at the very top of my budget. "It's a lot of house," the realtor warned as we toured it. The floors creaked. The wallpaper was peeling, and the kitchen hadn't been updated since the 1970s. But there was a reading nook with a window seat overlooking a small garden, and morning light streamed through stained glass panels in the front door. I could already see myself there. The bidding war was brutal. I lost sleep, lost weight. When my final offer was accepted, I sat on the floor of our apartment and cried like a child. Michael wrapped his arms around me, understanding that these were tears 15 years in the making. The day I signed the papers, Marjorie came with me. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," she said. The house keys felt impossibly heavy in my palm as I turned them in the lock for the first time. My house, my sanctuary, my future. For 6 months, we renovated. I painted every wall myself, learned basic plumbing from YouTube videos, and spent weekends scouring flea markets for furniture that felt just right. Michael helped when I asked, but understood when I wanted to do things myself. This wasn't just decorating. It was claiming space in the deepest sense. When we finally moved in fully, I hosted a small housewarming. Jen brought expensive wine, Frank from the diner brought pie, and Marjorie brought a framed copy of my first deposit slip. As everyone mingled in the kitchen, my kitchen, with its new countertops and the vintage stove I'd restored, I slipped away to the reading nook. Running my fingers along the windowsill, I felt a profound sense of peace. For 15 years, I had been working toward this moment, and now it was real. I belonged somewhere, finally, and no one could take that away from me. Or so I thought. The first signs of trouble appeared so gradually that I almost missed them. It started 3 months after we'd settled into the Newburyport house. Michael's mother, Eleanor, began dropping by unannounced, usually around dinner time on Sundays. "I was just in the neighborhood," she'd say, though she lived 40 minutes away in Gloucester. At first, these visits seemed harmless enough. Eleanor would bring a casserole or pie, staying for an hour or two before heading home. I tried to see it as her way of connecting with her son, maybe even warming up to me after years of polite distance. Then the visits increased to twice a week. She started bringing Michael's sister Brenda and her 2 teenage children, Alex and Madison. They'd spread out across my living room, feed on my coffee table, commenting on my decor choices. "This shade of blue is interesting," Brenda would say, running her fingers along my carefully painted walls. "Though I think a warmer tone would make the space feel more welcoming." "The kitchen is so small," Eleanor would add. "How do you manage when you have people over?" I'd bite my tongue, reminding myself they were family. Michael seemed oblivious to the undercurrent in these comments, happily catching up with his sister, while I served drinks I hadn't planned on providing. One Tuesday evening in October, Eleanor arrived with a measuring tape. I found her in my home office, stretching it across the walls. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. "Oh, just seeing if my antique desk would fit in here," she replied casually. "It's gathering dust in my attic." "I have a desk," I said, gesturing to the vintage writing desk I'd restored myself. "Yes, but a growing family needs proper furniture." She smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "This little table is fine for now, but eventually..." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn weather. What did she mean by growing family? Michael and I had discussed children and decided to wait at least another year. Had he told his mother different plans without consulting me? The following week, Eleanor and Brenda arrived with paint swatches for the guest bedroom. "We thought a soft yellow would be perfect for a nursery," Brenda explained, holding them against the wall of the room where I'd set up my small library. "We're not planning a nursery right now," I said firmly. Eleanor patted my arm. "Of course, dear, but it never hurts to be prepared." Later that evening, I tried to talk to Michael about it. "Don't you think your family is getting a bit presumptuous about our house?" "They're just excited for us," he said, not looking up from his laptop. Mom's always been a planner. But they're acting like they have a say in our home decisions. Michael finally looked at me. It's not a big deal, Sarah. Let them have their fun. The pit in my stomach grew. I started noticing other things. How Eleanor referred to the front bedroom as our room when we visit. How Brenda's kids had begun leaving their gaming equipment in the living room for next time. How they all used our bathroom without asking, leaving wet towels on my new tiles. But the real revelation came on a Sunday afternoon in November. I'd gone to pick up groceries, returning earlier than expected when the store was out of the special bread Michael liked. Their cars were in the driveway, another unannounced visit. I was about to call out when I heard my name from the kitchen. Sarah's too particular about this house, Eleanor was saying, acting like she's the only one with a stake in it. Well, technically she did pay for it, Michael's voice replied. Don't be naive, Eleanor snapped. You're married. What's hers? Is yours. Besides, family supports family. When your father and I needed space, your grandparents gave us their house. That was different, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Look, the house is too big for just the two of you. It makes perfect sense for us to move in. Brenda needs to save for the kids' college. I'm getting older and could use help. And you two will want children soon. We could all contribute to the mortgage. I froze in the hallway, grocery bags clutched to my chest. Move in? My mind raced back through the past weeks. The measuring, the comments about space, the casual claiming of rooms. It hadn't been casual, at all. Sarah would never agree to that, Michael said, but there was a question in his tone that made my blood run cold. She doesn't need to know yet, Brenda chimed in. We can ease into it. Mom stays more often, then I bring the kids for a weekend, then a week, like a frog in boiling water, Eleanor added with a laugh that made my skin crawl. She won't even notice until we're already settled. I don't know. Michael sounded uncertain. She's one person, Michael. We're your family. Besides, she's too soft to say no once we're already here. Remember how she couldn't even tell the contractor she didn't like the bathroom tiles? She lived with that awful green for 2 months before you spoke up. Their words hit me like physical blows. Too soft? Is that how they saw me? How Michael saw me? As someone too weak to protect her own boundaries? The kitchen tiles had been a minor issue, not worth confronting over. This was my home, my sanctuary, built from 15 years of sacrifice. I still think we should talk to her directly, Michael said. In time, Eleanor replied smoothly. But for now, let's just continue as we have been. I've already spoken to Pastor Williams about helping me pack up some of my things next weekend. I told him I'm moving in with my son and daughter-in-law to help with their coming baby. The grocery bag slipped from my hands. Cans rolled across the hardwood floor I'd refinished by hand. 3 heads snapped toward me from the kitchen doorway. Sarah! Michael's face drained of color. I didn't hear you come in. I looked from him to Eleanor to Brenda, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time. Eleanor's expression wasn't embarrassed but annoyed, like I'd interrupted something that wasn't my business. Brenda looked away, suddenly fascinated by her phone. And Michael, the man I'd married, who'd supposedly admired my independence, looked guilty but not surprised, as if this conversation wasn't new. How long? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. How long have you been planning to ambush? Me in my own home? Now, Sarah. Eleanor stepped forward. You're misunderstanding. We were just discussing family options. I heard exactly what you were discussing. I cut her off. And this isn't a family option. This is my house. Our house, Michael corrected quietly. I turned to him, the betrayal cutting deep. Is that what you think? That after standing by while I saved for 15 years, after watching me work 2 jobs and skip vacations and count pennies, you get to hand my achievement over to your family without even asking me? You're overreacting, Brenda said, finally, looking up from her phone. Families live together all the time. It's practical. Get out, I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. All of you except Michael. Out of my house. Now. Eleanor drew herself up. I don't think you're in any condition to— Out! I shouted, pointing to the door. Or I call the police and report trespassers. They left, Eleanor pausing at the door to shoot Michael a look that clearly said, handle this. When the door closed behind them, the silence in the house was deafening. Michael stood in the hallway, halfway between me and the door, as if unsure which way to go. Tell me you weren't part of this, I said quietly. Tell me you didn't know they were planning to take over our home. Michael ran a hand through his hair. It's not taking over, Sarah. It's sharing, and they're my family. And what am I? You're my wife. But that means we're all family now. We support each other. I laughed, a sharp sound with no humor. Support? Is that what you call going behind my back to plan a hostile takeover of the home I spent my entire adult life working toward? You're being dramatic. Mom just needs somewhere to stay for a while. Her house is too much for her to manage alone. Then she should sell it and buy something smaller. Or you should help her maintain it. Those are normal solutions. Moving your entire extended family into our house without even discussing it with me? That's not support. That's betrayal. I could see him shifting strategies, his expression softening into the placating look he used when we disagreed about small things like dinner plans or movie choices. Let's just sleep on it, okay? You've had a shock. We can talk about this rationally, in the morning. But I was done being managed, done being underestimated. There's nothing to talk about, Michael. Your mother and sister are not moving in. Not tomorrow, not next week, not ever. This is non-negotiable. Something hardened in his eyes then, something I'd never seen before. You're being selfish. They're family. They need us. And I needed you to have my back. Looks like we're both disappointed. I turned and walked upstairs to our bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. Through the floor, I could hear Michael on the phone, his voice low but intense. I didn't need to hear the words to know he was talking to Eleanor, planning their next move perhaps, or maybe just reporting that his attempt to handle me had failed. For the first time since moving in, my beautiful home felt like a battleground, and I was terribly afraid I'd already lost my most important ally in the fight ahead. I barely slept that night. The moonlight filtering through the curtains I'd sewn myself cast strange shadows across the room, making the familiar space feel alien. Downstairs, Michael had taken to the couch. His choice, not mine. Every creak of the old Victorian house made me tense, as if Eleanor and her brood might materialize from the darkened corners. Morning came with no resolution. Michael and I moved around each other like wary strangers, the silence broken only by the clink of coffee mugs and the rustle of the newspaper. I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Some battles couldn't be postponed. We need to talk, I finally said, sitting across from him at the breakfast table. Michael glanced up from his phone. About yesterday? Look, I'm sorry you overheard things that way, but— No, I cut him off. I'm not sorry I overheard. I'm only sorry it took eavesdropping for me to learn what my husband and his family have been planning behind my back. He sighed. Sarah, you're making this into something it's not. Mom is getting older. Brenda's struggling financially since the divorce. It just makes sense for family to help family. And did it ever occur to you to discuss this with me before making promises to them? I didn't make promises. You didn't stop them either. You sat there while they called me too soft and plotted to manipulate me into accepting their plan. I took a steadying breath. Michael, this isn't about helping family. This is about them wanting what I have. That's ridiculous. He pushed away from the table. Not everything is about you and your precious house. The words stung, but they also confirmed what I'd been trying to deny. Michael had never really understood what this home meant to me. To him, it was just property, nice to have, but fundamentally interchangeable with any other four walls and a roof. My house is not up for grabs, I said quietly. Not to your mother, not to Brenda, not to anyone. If they need a place to live, there are plenty of other solutions that don't involve taking over the home I spent 15 years earning. Jesus, Sarah, no one's trying to take anything from you. We're talking about sharing space with family, who need it. That's what normal people do. Normal people ask first. They don't measure rooms and spread rumors about babies that don't exist. They don't treat the homeowner like an obstacle to be managed. Michael raked his hands through his hair in frustration. Fine. I'm asking now. Can my mother and sister stay with us for a while? There. Was that so hard? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt a profound sadness. Yes, actually. It was too hard for you to do yesterday or last week, or whenever this plan was first hatched. And now you're not asking. You're demanding, with a side of emotional manipulation. For God's sake, Sarah. The doorbell interrupted. Us. Michael glanced toward the front of the house, and something in his expression made my stomach drop. You invited them over? Now? He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Mom texted that she was coming to clear the air. I didn't think it would help to tell her no. Of course you didn't, I muttered, rising from the table. Heaven forbid anyone in your family hear the word no. Eleanor didn't wait for an invitation after Michael opened the door. She swept in like she owned the place, followed by Brenda, and surprisingly, Pastor Williams from the First Methodist Church where Michael had grown up. The pastor looked distinctly uncomfortable, his eyes darting around as if searching for escape routes. Sarah. Eleanor nodded stiffly in my direction before settling herself on my sofa, the vintage piece I'd found at an estate sale and painstakingly reupholstered. I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. That's one way to put it, I replied, choosing to remain standing. I've asked Pastor Williams to join us, she continued, gesturing to the man hovering by the door. I thought a neutral third party might help us communicate more effectively. The pastor cleared his throat. I was told this was about family reconciliation. Eleanor mentioned some tension. Did she mention the source of that tension? I asked. Did she tell you she's been planning to move her entire family into my home without my knowledge or consent? His eyebrows shot up. Well, no. Not in those terms. Let's all calm down, Brenda interjected, perching on the arm of the sofa. This doesn't need to be so dramatic. I agree, Eleanor said smoothly. Sarah, dear, I understand you're attached to this house, but surely you can see that this arrangement makes sense for everyone. Michael wouldn't have to worry about me, alone in that big old house in Gloucester. Brenda could save for the kids' futures, and you and Michael would have built-in childcare when you start your family. We're not starting a family anytime soon, I said. And even if we were, these decisions would be between me and my husband, not his entire extended family. Family decisions affect the whole family, Eleanor countered, her tone hardening. Michael has responsibilities beyond just you. Mom, Michael warned, finally seeming to realize things were spiraling. No, let her speak, I said. I want to hear exactly what she thinks my husband's responsibilities are. Eleanor straightened, clearly sensing an opening. Well, for one, honoring his family, supporting his mother in her later years, helping his sister through hard times. These are Christian duties, aren't they, Pastor? The pastor shifted uncomfortably. The Bible does teach us to honor our parents and care for family members in need, but... Exactly, Eleanor interrupted. And here's Sarah with all this space, refusing to share God's blessings. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. God's blessings? I worked 2 jobs for 15 years to buy this house. I saved every penny while you were living comfortably in your Gloucester home that, by the way, you could sell for a considerable sum if you're truly struggling. That house has been in our family for generations, Brenda protested. We can't just sell it. But I should give up the home I've owned for less than a year. How convenient. Eleanor's face darkened. You're being selfish, Sarah. Plain and simple. No. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. Pastor? Eleanor turned to the increasingly uneasy man. Please explain to Sarah the importance of Christian charity. Pastor Williams cleared his throat again. I believe charity should be freely given, not coerced. And while the Bible does teach generosity, it also respects the sanctity of one's home and personal property. Eleanor's eyes narrowed dangerously. Whose side are you on? I'm not here to take sides, he replied with unexpected firmness. I was under the impression this was a mediation, not an ambush. Michael finally stepped forward. This is getting out of hand. Mom, maybe we should continue this another time. No, I said, squaring my shoulders. Let's resolve this now. Eleanor, Brenda, I want to be absolutely clear. You will not be moving into this house. Not now. Not ever. If you need financial help, we can discuss other options. If you need assistance maintaining your home, we can arrange that. But this house is not available. Eleanor rose from the sofa, her face flushed with anger. You ungrateful witch! After all we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I interrupted. Made me feel unwelcome at family gatherings, criticized my choices, planned to take over my home behind my back. I welcomed you into our family. No, you tolerated me because Michael chose me. There's a difference. Eleanor turned to Michael. Are you going to let her speak to me this way? In front of a man of God, no less? All eyes turned to my husband. In that moment, I realized the true nature of the ultimatum before us. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about whether Michael was my partner or his mother's son first. His eyes met mine, and I saw conflict there, but also something else, a resolution I didn't understand. Mom, he said quietly, Sarah's right. We should have talked about this properly, as a couple. Eleanor's jaw dropped. Michael, this is Sarah's house, he continued. She worked for it. She earned it. If you need help, we'll find another way. For a brief, shining moment, hope flared in my chest. Then Eleanor played her trump card. If you choose her over your family in this, Michael, don't expect us to welcome you for Christmas, or any other time. Her voice was ice cold. You'd be picking a house over flesh and blood. That's not fair, Michael protested. Life isn't fair, Brenda chimed in, but family is supposed to stick together. I watched my husband's face as the weight of their manipulation settled on him. The conflict in his eyes deepened, and the resolution I'd glimpsed wavered. Maybe, he began hesitantly, maybe we could work out a compromise. A temporary arrangement. No, I said flatly. There is no compromise on this, Michael. Not after the way they've behaved. Not after what I overheard yesterday. The silence that followed was deafening. Pastor? Williams looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Brenda examined her fingernails with sudden interest. And Eleanor? Eleanor smiled. A small, victorious smile that sent chills down my spine. Well, she said, I think we know where everyone stands now. Yes, I agreed, moving toward the front door and opening it wide. We certainly do, and now I'd like you all to leave my home. Sarah, Michael began, but I cut him off with a look. All of you, I repeated. I need some time alone. Eleanor gathered her purse with deliberate slowness. This isn't over, she murmured as she passed me. Yes, it is, I replied, loud enough for everyone to hear. And Michael, when you come back, we need to have a serious conversation about our future, because I won't live like this, constantly defending my home and my boundaries from your family. The look he gave me as he followed. His mother out the door told me everything I needed to know. The battle lines had been drawn, and despite his momentary stand against Eleanor, I wasn't sure which side he'd ultimately choose. As I closed and locked the door behind them, Pastor Williams lingered on the porch. For what it's worth, he said, quietly, I think you're in the right here. Stand your ground. I nodded, too emotionally drained for words. As his car pulled away, I leaned against the door and slid to the floor, the full weight of what had just happened crashing over me. The house was quiet now. My house, earned through years of sacrifice. But for the first time since I'd gotten the keys, the silence felt oppressive rather than peaceful. I'd fought for my boundaries today, but I knew with bone-deep certainty that Eleanor wasn't done fighting for what she wanted. And what she wanted was everything I had. 3 days passed in a fog of tense silence. Michael returned home that evening after the confrontation, but things between us were fractured. He slept in the guest room, leaving for work before sunrise and returning late. We exchanged only the most necessary words, orbiting each other like distant planets. I threw myself into work, grateful for the demands of the upcoming holiday marketing campaign at Carter and Mitchell. You okay, Sarah? My colleague Danielle asked during our lunch break. You seem somewhere else lately. Just tired, I lied, not ready to admit that my marriage might be crumbling over a house that was supposed to represent security and happiness. On Thursday evening, I arrived home to find Michael sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty beer in front of him. We need to talk, he said, his voice quiet but determined. I set down my bag, steeling myself. I'm listening. I've been thinking about everything. About the house, my family, us. He pushed the beer away. I love you, Sarah. I don't want to lose what we have. Hope flickered in my chest. I bought it with money I saved before our marriage, and our prenuptial agreement specifically addresses it. Patricia nodded. And your husband invited his family to move in without your consent, after you'd explicitly refused. Yes. Do you have any reason to believe they might try again? The question gave me pause. I'm not sure. My mother-in-law is persistent. Then let's be proactive. Patricia pulled out a legal pad. First, I recommend a cease and desist letter making it clear they're not welcome on your property without explicit invitation from you. Second, given what you've told me about their behavior, we should consider temporary restraining orders. Restraining orders? I repeated, the words feeling surreal. Against my husband's family? Based on their actions, yes. They attempted to take possession of your property against your wishes, and have shown a pattern of disregarding your boundaries. That's legally problematic. I thought about Eleanor's determined face, about Brenda's kids glaring at me, about the furniture they'd already started arranging in my home. Okay, I agreed. Whatever you think is necessary. Patricia's eyes softened. Sarah, I should ask, where? Do you see your marriage in all this? These actions will likely create further strain. The question hit me like a physical blow. Where did I see my marriage? 24 hours ago, I might have said we were just going through a rough patch. Now, I don't know, I admitted. My husband betrayed my trust in a fundamental way. I need to protect myself first, then figure out the rest. Patricia nodded. Fair enough. I'll draft the documents today. On my way home, I stopped by Carter and Mitchell to request a week of emergency personal leave. My boss, Jim, took one look at my face and approved it without questions. When I pulled into my driveway, Michael's car was there. I steeled myself before entering, unsure what version of my husband I would find. The apologetic one from yesterday, or the man who had betrayed me by inviting his family to invade our home. He sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. His eyes were rimmed with red, his shirt rumpled. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes, we do." I set my purse down, but remained standing. "I just came from a lawyer's office." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, then anger, then resignation. "A divorce lawyer?" "A family lawyer," I clarified. "I'm filing restraining orders against your mother and sister." "Jesus, Sarah, isn't that extreme? After everything that happened yesterday." "What happened yesterday," I interrupted, "was that your family tried to force their way into my home after I explicitly told them they weren't welcome. What happened was that my husband lied to me, went behind my back, and betrayed my trust in the most fundamental way possible." Michael stood, pacing the kitchen. "I know I messed up. I know I should have talked to you first. But they manipulated me too, Sarah. Mom told me they were being evicted, that they had nowhere to go, and you believed her without question, without verifying any of it? She's my mother. And I'm your wife," I shot back. "The woman you promised to build a life with, to protect, to cherish. Where was that man yesterday?" Michael's shoulders slumped. "I don't know. I got caught in the middle. I thought if I could just get them settled, if you could see they really needed help, we could work it out." "That's not how partnerships work, Michael. You don't manipulate your partner into accepting something they've clearly refused." He looked up, eyes suddenly fierce. "Like you're not manipulating me now? Restraining orders? Legal action against my family? You don't think that's putting me in an impossible position?" "I'm protecting myself," I replied evenly. "Something I apparently need to do since my husband won't." The doorbell rang, interrupting our standoff. Through the front window, I saw Eleanor's silver Lexus parked across the street. My stomach knotted. "Did you invite them here?" I demanded. Michael looked genuinely surprised. "No, I told Mom we needed space to figure things out." The doorbell rang again, followed by insistent knocking. I moved to the front door, Michael close behind. Through the peephole, I could see Eleanor, Brenda, and to my shock, Michael's brother Ryan, who lived in Chicago and whom I'd only met twice at family events. "What's Ryan doing here?" I whispered to Michael. "I have no idea," he replied, looking equally confused. The knocking intensified. "Michael, Sarah, we know you're in there." Eleanor's voice carried easily through the door. I took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping the security chain engaged. "What do you want, Eleanor?" "We need to talk," she said, her tone artificially pleasant. "As a family." "We have nothing to discuss," I replied. "Please leave." Ryan stepped forward. "Sarah, please. Mom called me in Chicago, said there's been a huge misunderstanding. I flew in to help sort things out." "There's no misunderstanding," I said firmly. "Your mother and sister tried to move into my house against my wishes. That's trespassing, and it's not welcome." Eleanor's pleasant mask slipped. "This ridiculous selfishness has gone on long enough. Michael, tell her to open the door." Michael moved beside me, visible through the crack. "Mom, I told you we need space. This isn't helping." "Space?" Eleanor's voice rose. "You're my son. She's poisoned you, against your own family." "You should go," Michael said, his voice firmer than I'd expected. "We can talk later when everyone's calmer." "We're not leaving until this is resolved," Brenda declared. "We'll stay right here on this porch if we have to." I closed the door, turning to Michael. "Call the police." His eyes widened. "Sarah, call them or I will." For a tense moment, we stared at each other, the knocking resuming on the other side of the door. Then, to my surprise, Michael pulled out his phone and dialed. "Hello?" "Yes, we have a situation at 47 Maple Street. My family members are refusing to leave my property and are creating a disturbance." His voice faded as he walked into the kitchen to complete the call. 20 minutes later, 2 Newburyport police cruisers pulled up in front of our house. Eleanor, Brenda, and Ryan were still on the porch, having moved to the wicker chairs I'd placed there for summer evenings. They looked up in shock as the officers approached. "What's going on here?" The older officer, whose nameplate read Garcia, asked as he reached the steps. I opened the door fully, Michael beside me. "These people are on my property after being told to leave," I explained. "They're causing a disturbance." "This is a family matter," Eleanor interjected quickly. "Just a misunderstanding. There's no need for police involvement." Officer Garcia looked between us. "Ma'am, do you own this residence?" "Yes," I replied. "It's solely in my name. I have the deed inside if you need to see it." "That won't be necessary right now." "And you've asked these individuals to leave?" "Multiple times." He turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am, if the property owner has asked you to leave, you need to comply. Otherwise, you're trespassing." Eleanor's face flushed with indignation. "My son lives here. He's invited us." Michael stepped forward. "That's not true. I've also asked them to leave." Officer Garcia nodded. "Then I'm going to have to insist you all vacate the premises immediately." "This is outrageous," Brenda sputtered. "We're family." "Family or not, the law is clear," the younger officer added. "You need to leave now, or we'll have to escort you off the property." Eleanor stood, drawing herself to her full height. "Michael, if you let this happen, if you choose her over your own blood, don't ever expect to be welcome back. Do you understand? You'll be dead to us." The naked manipulation hung in the air between us. Michael flinched, but didn't waver. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mom." Something broke in Eleanor's expression then. The absolute certainty that her son would choose her, crumbling before our eyes. She grabbed her purse, moving stiffly toward the steps. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and venomous. "That witch has turned you against us, but you'll see the truth eventually." "Ma'am," Officer Garcia said warningly, "I'd advise against making threats." "It's not a threat," Eleanor hissed. "It's a promise." We watched in silence as they retreated to the Lexus. As they drove away, Officer Garcia turned to us. "Do you want to file a report about this incident?" "Yes," I said immediately, just as Michael said, "No." We looked at each other, the distance between us suddenly vast. "Let's step inside and discuss this," Officer Garcia suggested diplomatically. In the kitchen, I showed the officers the restraining order paperwork I'd begun with Patricia, explaining the previous day's events. Michael sat silently at the table, looking increasingly pale. "Given what you've described," Officer Garcia said after hearing the full story, "I'd strongly recommend continuing with the restraining orders. This behavior shows a pattern that could escalate." After the officers left, promising to increase patrols in our neighborhood, Michael and I faced each other across the kitchen island, the silence heavy between us. "Restraining orders," he said finally, the words hollow. "I don't want that either. But I also can't cut my mother and sister out of my life. They need help, and I need to find a way to provide it." He looked up at me. "I've been looking at apartments nearby. Small places, but decent. I thought maybe we could help with the first few months' rent, get them established closer to us without them actually living here." It was a reasonable compromise, one I should have been relieved by. Yet something in his expression made me wary. "Have you discussed this with them?" Michael's eyes shifted away. "Not yet. I wanted to clear it with you first." "Thank you," I said, genuinely appreciative of this small step. that sounds like a good solution. We can look at numbers this weekend, see what we can afford to help with. He nodded, but the tension in his shoulders didn't ease. We ate dinner together for the first time that week. Not quite comfortable, but not openly hostile either. Later, he returned to the guest room without discussion. Progress, but tentative. Friday morning, I left early for a client meeting in downtown, Boston. The session ran long, stretching into the afternoon. As I was gathering my materials to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, my next-door neighbor. "Is your family moving in? There are a lot of cars and people carrying boxes at your place." My blood froze. Without bothering to explain to my clients, I rushed out, calling an Uber, rather than waiting for the commuter rail. The entire hour-long ride back to Newburyport, I tried calling Michael, straight to voicemail every time. When the car finally turned onto my street, I saw them. 4 vehicles crowded my driveway and curb. Eleanor's silver Lexus, Brenda's minivan, an unfamiliar pickup truck loaded with furniture, and Michael's Subaru. The front door of my house stood wide open. Through the windows, I could see figures moving inside. I paid the driver and stepped out, legs shaking with adrenaline and fury. As I approached, I saw Alex and Madison carrying backpacks and duffel, bags up my porch steps. Brenda's ex-husband Tom was unloading a dresser from the pickup. In my garden, Eleanor directed 2 men I didn't recognize as they carried what appeared to be her antique china cabinet across my lawn. "What the hell is going on?" My voice came out steadier than I expected. Everyone froze. Eleanor recovered, first, plastering on a smile. "Oh, Sarah, you're home early. We were hoping to get settled before you returned." "Settled?" I repeated, the word tasting like poison. "Michael didn't tell you?" Her surprise seemed genuine, which somehow made everything worse. "He called yesterday and said you'd both reconsidered, that we could move in this weekend." I scanned the yard for my husband, finding him emerging from the house, arms full of fresh linens I recognized from our hall closet. "Michael?" The single word contained all my questions. The guilt on his face told me everything. "I was going to explain tonight," he said weakly. "Mom called yesterday. They'd been evicted from their rental." "Rental?" I interrupted. "What rental? They live in the house in Gloucester." Michael looked confused. "No. They had to sell that months ago. They've been renting since September." I turned to Eleanor, whose smile had vanished. "You told him you were evicted? From a house you've supposedly been renting since September?" "Well, not exactly evicted," she amended quickly. "The landlord is selling, and we have to be out by next week. So you decided to show up today with all your possessions without confirming with me first?" Michael said. "I don't care what Michael said." I cut her off. "This is my house. I never agreed to this." Brenda stepped forward. "Sarah, be reasonable. We have nowhere else to go." "That's not my problem," I replied, my voice eerily calm, even to my own ears. "And I find it hard to believe you suddenly have nowhere to go when you've been living comfortably in Gloucester all this time." "Things change," Eleanor snapped, dropping all pretense of friendliness. "Circumstances get difficult. Not that you'd understand sacrifice." I laughed, the sound harsh and foreign. "I wouldn't understand sacrifice. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years to afford this house. I lived in basement apartments with black mold. I skipped meals to make rent. Don't you dare talk to me about sacrifice." Michael moved toward me, hands raised placatingly. "Sarah, please, just let them stay tonight. We can figure this out." "No." The word fell like a gavel. "They leave. Now." "You can't make us leave," Brenda said. "Michael invited us. He lives here too." "Actually, I can." I pulled out my phone. "The deed to this house is in my name only. Michael and I have separate finances, as clearly stated in our prenuptial agreement. If you don't leave willingly, I'll have you removed as trespassers." Eleanor's face contorted with rage. "You selfish, heartless—" "Mom," Michael interrupted. "She's right. I shouldn't have. I made a mistake." He turned to me, eyes pleading. "I thought I could make everyone happy. I thought once you saw them here, saw they had nowhere else to go, you'd understand." "Understand what?" I asked. "That my husband would betray me? That he'd go behind my back after promising me a compromise? That he'd let his family lie to manipulate both of us?" "They're not lying," he insisted. "They do need help. Maybe they do. But this isn't how you ask for it. And this—" I gestured to the furniture scattered across my lawn, the boxes piled on my porch. "This isn't help. This is an invasion." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then Eleanor broke the standoff by storming toward me, finger raised, accusingly. "You've poisoned him against his family. You and your precious house. Well, let me tell you something." I didn't hear what she wanted to tell me, because at that moment, Lisa from next door appeared at my side, her husband Jeff, close behind. "Everything okay here, Sarah?" Jeff asked, his solid presence somehow grounding. "No," I said simply. "These people are trespassing on my property, and I've asked them to leave." "We're family," Brenda protested. "We were invited." "Not by me," I replied. "And as the legal owner of this property, my permission is the only one that matters." Lisa slipped her arm through mine supportively. "Should we call the police, Sarah?" Eleanor's eyes widened. "The police? You'd call the police on your husband's family?" "Without hesitation," I confirmed. "You have exactly 30 minutes to get your things off my property. Whatever remains after that will be considered abandoned." "Michael," Eleanor turned to her. "Son, are you going to allow this?" All eyes focused on my husband, caught in the impossible space between his wife and his mother. The choice he made in that moment would determine everything that followed. "Mom," he said finally, "you need to go," Eleanor gasped dramatically. "After everything I've done for you?" "You lied to me," he said, his voice hardening. "You told me you'd discuss this with Sarah, that she'd agreed. You said you were being evicted. Were any of those things true?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "I'll help you load everything back up," Michael continued, his shoulders straightening. "But you need to leave. Today." What followed was the most awkward 30 minutes of my life. Under the watchful eyes of Lisa and Jeff, Eleanor, Brenda, and the teenagers grudgingly loaded their possessions back into the vehicles. No one spoke except to give necessary directions. Alex and Madison shot me venomous glares, clearly having been told I was the villain in this scenario. As they prepared to leave, Michael approached me. "I'm going to help them find somewhere to stay tonight," he said quietly. "We need to talk when I get back." I nodded, too emotionally exhausted for words. As the caravan of vehicles pulled away from my house, I sat heavily on the porch steps, trembling with aftermath of adrenaline. Lisa settled beside me. "Want to tell me what that was all about?" "Not yet," I said, staring at the tire marks on my driveway. "But when I do, we're going to need wine. Lots of it." She squeezed my shoulder and left me to the silence of my reclaimed home, which now felt more like a battlefield than a sanctuary. Michael didn't come home that night. Around 11, he texted, "Staying at a hotel to clear my head. We'll talk tomorrow." I should have been worried, should have begged him to come home. Instead, I felt a strange relief at having the house to myself. I walked through each room, running my fingers along the walls, as if to reassure myself they were still mine. In the guest room, the room Eleanor had intended to claim, I stripped the bed Michael had prepared for her and remade it with fresh linens, erasing any trace of their attempted coup. Sleep evaded me, my mind replaying the day's events on an endless loop. By dawn, exhaustion had given way to resolve. I showered, dressed, and called Marjorie from the bank. Sarah, everything okay? I need some legal advice, I said, skipping pleasantries. Or at least a referral to someone who can help. 2 hours later, I sat in the office of Patricia Chen, a family lawyer Marjorie had recommended. After listening to my story without interruption, Patricia leaned forward, hands clasped on her desk. Let me make sure I understand. The house is solely in your name? Yes. Against my mother and sister? Yes. And if I asked you not to? I met his gaze steadily. I'd do it anyway. This isn't a negotiation, Michael. They tried to take over my home. Our home. They manipulated you, lied to both of us, and then tried to intimidate me when that didn't work. I need to protect myself. From my family, he said, his voice cracking. Yes, I replied simply. From your family. The reality of our situation settled over us like a shroud. The life we had built together, the future we had planned. All of it now hanging by a thread, frayed by his family's actions and his own choices. I need time to think, Michael said, standing abruptly. I'll stay at a hotel again tonight. As he packed a bag upstairs, I sat on the living room sofa, looking out at the garden I'd been so careful to plant last spring. The mums were blooming now, their rich autumn colors vibrant against the fading grass. I had imagined growing old in this house, watching seasons change through these windows year after year, with Michael by my side. Now I wondered if I would be watching those seasons alone. The temporary restraining orders were granted 3 days later. Patricia had moved efficiently, presenting the evidence of Eleanor and Brenda's attempts to forcibly occupy my home. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, had little patience for family drama, masquerading as necessity. The court takes a dim view of attempts to intimidate or coerce property owners, she stated as she signed the orders. These will remain in effect for 90 days, at which point we'll reassess the situation. I felt no triumph as I left the courthouse, just a hollow relief. Michael hadn't come to the hearing. He'd been staying at the Holiday Inn downtown for nearly a week, our communication limited to terse texts about practical matters. The restraining orders were approved, I texted him after leaving the courthouse. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, I understand. Not, I support you. Not, I'm sorry it came to this. Just acknowledgement without emotion. That evening, he appeared at the house to collect more clothes. We moved around each other like ghosts, careful not to touch, not to engage beyond the most superficial level. As he zipped his duffel bag, I finally broke the silence. Are we going to talk about this? Michael paused, not looking at me. What's there to say? You've made your position clear. My position? I repeated. You mean protecting our home from people who tried to take it over? They're still my family, Sarah. And I'm still your wife. Or have you forgotten that? He turned then, eyes hollow with exhaustion. How could I forget? You've put me in an impossible position. No, I countered, anger flaring. Your mother put you in this position when she decided my home was hers for the taking. When she lied to you about being evicted. When she showed up with furniture and attitude, ready to claim what I spent 15 years earning. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple, I interrupted. This is about respect, Michael. Your family doesn't respect me, my boundaries, or what's mine. And honestly, I'm not sure you do either. He flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? You went behind my back after promising to help find them another solution. You gave them keys to our house. You prepared the guest room for your mother after I explicitly said she couldn't stay here. I made a mistake, he admitted. I thought